The morning Darius Coleman lost everything started like any other, except by 5 o'clock that evening he would either break completely or discover a strength he never knew he carried. He stood in the glass-walled office on the 40th floor, his hands folded in front of him, listening to the man who held his paycheck tell him that his life outside these walls meant nothing anymore. 3 years of loyalty, 3 years of missed dinners, skipped recitals, and nights spent finishing reports long after his daughter had fallen asleep waiting for him. None of it mattered now. The CEO's voice was flat, almost bored, as he delivered his ultimatum. Either Darius accepted a transfer that would take him across the country, away from his 6-year-old daughter Maya's school, her friends, the small apartment they had finally started to call home, or he could pack his desk and leave by the end of the day. Do as I say, or quit. Those 6 words would replay in Darius's mind for weeks afterward. But in that moment he simply asked for a night to think about it. The answer he already knew was going to cost him more than a job. If stories like this move you, if you believe people who choose their families over fear deserve to be seen, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that second chances are real. And subscribe to Kindness Corner so you never miss a story like this one. Darius drove home that night with his knuckles pale against the steering wheel, rehearsing 100 different ways to explain to Maya why dinner might be macaroni from a box again. Why the birthday trip they talked about might not happen this year. When he opened the door to their small apartment, Maya ran to him the way she always did, arms wrapped around his legs, asking if he'd remembered to get the blue balloons for her class party. He hadn't. He'd forgotten, because his mind had been consumed by boardrooms and severance packages, and the particular cruelty of a man who saw fathers as inconvenient line items. That night, after Maya was asleep, Darius sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a calculator, and he wrote down every number that mattered. Rent, groceries, the community college night classes he'd been paying off, the savings account that wouldn't survive 2 months without a paycheck. And beneath all those numbers, in handwriting that shook slightly, he wrote the real question. Could he live with himself if he let a man like that decide what kind of father he was allowed to be? The weeks that followed tested every ounce of resolve Darius had. He walked out of that office the next morning with a cardboard box holding 3 years of his life, and the silence of the elevator ride down felt heavier than anything he'd carried before. Unemployment applications blurred together. Interviews came and went, some promising, most going nowhere, and each rejection letter felt like confirmation that walking away had been a foolish, prideful mistake. There were nights he sat in his car in a grocery store parking lot, engine off, just breathing, trying to keep the panic from reaching Maya's bedroom door. He picked up whatever work he could find. Delivery shifts, weekend handyman jobs, anything that kept the lights on, while still showing up to every school event, every parent-teacher conference, every moment that mattered to his daughter. Because if he had given all that up for nothing, he needed at least to know he hadn't given up on being present. It was during one of those handyman jobs, repairing a leaking sink for an elderly woman named Miss Odessa a few blocks from his apartment, that everything began to shift. She noticed the calluses on his hands and the careful, meticulous way he worked, and she asked him more questions than most clients ever bothered to. When she learned he'd studied business administration at night school while working full-time, and that he had a quiet obsession with logistics and small business efficiency, she told him about her nephew, who ran a struggling local delivery service and desperately needed someone who understood both the numbers and the people behind them. It wasn't glamorous work at first. Long hours, low pay, a single rented van with a temperamental engine. But for the first time in months, Darius felt something other than survival. He felt purpose. He began restructuring routes, cutting wasted hours, treating every driver like a person instead of a resource, the way he had once wished someone had treated him. Within a year, that small delivery service had tripled its client base. Within 2, Darius had bought out a partnership stake using savings he'd rebuilt dollar by careful dollar. He brought in his own systems, his own values, hiring single parents first, whenever he could, building in flexibility for school pickups and sick days because he remembered exactly what it felt like to be told that his daughter's needs were an inconvenience. By the 3rd year, the company he now co-owned had expanded into 2 neighboring cities, and reporters had started calling, curious about the quiet, unassuming man behind a rapidly growing regional success story. Darius rarely talked about the CEO who had once given him that ultimatum. He didn't need to. His life had already answered the question for him. The moment that stayed with him most, though, had nothing to do with revenue or headlines. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday when Maya, now 9 years old, sat across from him at their new kitchen table, bigger now, in a home they owned outright, and told her class in a school presentation about family heroes that her father was the bravest person she knew because he chose her over a job that tried to make him small. Darius sat in the back of that classroom, holding back tears he didn't bother explaining to anyone, understanding finally that every terrifying, uncertain night had led to this. He hadn't just built a company. He had shown his daughter, in the most real way possible, what it looked like to choose love over fear, even when the cost seemed unbearable. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever had to choose between what's easy and what's right, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Stories like Darius and Maya's remind us that walking away from what diminishes us isn't weakness, it's the beginning of something greater. Before you go, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever walked away from something that scared you, only to find it led you somewhere better? Share your story below. It might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Darius Coleman never received an apology from the man who once tried to make him choose between his career and his daughter. And in time he realized he didn't need one. Some of life's harshest ultimatums end up being disguised invitations toward the life we were always meant to build. And for Darius and Maya, that invitation led straight to a home filled with warmth, stability, and a love no boardroom could ever take away.